My father, who worked as a teacher in the municipal high school in Tiruvannamalai, met the Maharshi in 1927 and asked a question for which he was very sorry in the later years of his life. He asked the Maharshi, "There are so many sadhus wandering around. How am I to know who is a genuine one?" The Maharshi most graciously said, "He is a real sadhu in whose presence you get an indescribable peace without making any effort." From 1928 to 1961, my father taught at a convent school in Kodaikanal. During this period, for 7 years, he was a tutor to the Princess of Nabha, which was a state in the Punjab, whose maharaja was brought to Kodaikanal as a punishment by the British. The maharaja and the princess, the Maharani, were deeply impressed with the life and teachings of the Maharshi, who they learned about from my father. In 1944, when the maharaja was not too well health-wise, he asked my father to go and seek the blessings of Bhagavan. When my father spoke to Bhagavan about the maharaja's condition, he listened with great attention, but kept silent. The ashram authorities then gave prasad for the maharaja. After opening the covering containing the prasad, the maharaja told my father, "Krishna Swami, the Maharshi has intimated that I am not going to live long. You see, in this envelope, there is no kumkum. There is only vibhuti." The maharaja passed away 4 months later. Hearing from my father and uncle that Bhagavan used to read letters written to him by devotees, I used to write to him occasionally from the hostel of the high school, where I studied from 1941 to 1945. Once I went to Bhagavan with my uncle and was looking at him. Bhagavan asked my uncle about me. On being told that I was his nephew, Bhagavan said, "So, you are the person writing letters to me." This gave me a strange feeling of awe, coupled with great joy, and I said in a low voice, "Yes." Then Bhagavan remarked, "Does your father send money to you so that you can write these letters?" And then he laughed. I wasn't quite sure whether Bhagavan was being sarcastic or made the remark in a light vein. I sweated for a while, continuing to look at Bhagavan. After completing my schooling in 1945, I applied for admissions to American College, Madurai. On the day I was to leave from Madurai, I went to Bhagavan, prostrated to him, and took leave of him. On inquiry, I told him that I was going to Madurai for admission in college. And Bhagavan asked, "Which college?" I wanted to say American College, but instead said Madurai College. Bhagavan smiled and said, "Sorry," meaning all right. I could not get admission to American College, but got admission to Madurai College in Madurai. In 1949, I attended the Kumbha Bhikshakam at a temple which was an elaborate solemn affair. In the evening, after arati was offered to the deity in the temple, it was brought to Bhagavan. I was sitting very close to him in the hall, attached to the temple. It was a moving sight when Bhagavan extended his hands and touched the arati with great reverence, closing his eyes. Soon after, every operation was performed on Bhagavan's arm. I used to visit him. I cried uncontrollably, looking at Bhagavan from a distance. As far as Bhagavan was concerned, he was ever the same serene, blissful self. He behaved as if the disease belonged to somebody else. In fact, once in 1946, when I was an 18-year-old student, I was walking towards the old meditation hall with my head down, thinking of something. When I looked up, I saw Bhagavan talking to a devotee near the well adjacent to the hall. I did not expect Bhagavan to be there. When he looked at me sideways, I stood still, as I did not want to disturb him. I felt a powerful light penetrate and engulf me. The bliss that I experienced was unique. I was in that state for about 20 days. And sometime in 1949, I sat at the entrance of the new hall outside the Mother's Temple, looking at Bhagavan. Then I thought to myself, I have been coming to the ashram so often, but have had no experience of real meditation. Bhagavan has not granted me this experience. Thinking along these lines, I kept looking at Bhagavan for a considerable time and then closed my eyes. I do not know how long I was in that state. When I opened my eyes, I found the meditation hall empty. Bhagavan and the devotees must have gone past me as I was sitting at the entrance. When I realized that I had been sitting when Bhagavan went past me, I was horrified. But suddenly, I realized that Bhagavan, out of his unbounded grace, had granted me an experience whereby I was completely oblivious of my surroundings. In August 1949, I visited the ashram from Madras, where I was studying. After his second operation, Bhagavan was sitting in the new hall. People were not allowed to sit inside the hall. They could enter, prostrate, and leave the hall. On 16th August, I planned to leave for Madras. So I went to the hall, prostrated, and went close to Bhagavan to say, I am leaving. Normally he would say, sorry, but that day he turned his face to the other side. I came out, sat outside for some time, and went in again. I prostrated and said that I was leaving. But again, he turned his face to the other side. Once again, I came out and sat for some time. And for the third time, I entered, prostrated, and said I was leaving. But he still turned his face, and I was puzzled. As I was getting late for the train, I decided to leave for the station. Hardly had I gone some distance, I felt it difficult to proceed. I came back and decided to leave only after Bhagavan's consent. When the next day I went to the hall, prostrated, and said that I was leaving, to my joy and surprise, Bhagavan said, sorry. Till today, I do not know why Bhagavan did not give me permission to leave the previous day. My final year examinations were in March 1950, and in February, T.V. Krishnaswamy Iyer, my sister's father-in-law and a great devotee of Bhagavan, gave me a copy of Marunganar's commentary, which ran over 100 pages. Deeply impressed with the manuscript, I copied it in its entirety in a few days, without worrying for the examination. I felt this was more important than the examination. The first paper, Old English, contained passages for translation from Old English to Modern English. I had not prepared well. The day before the examination, I opened the book at random and translated the passage that I found on that page and went to sleep. In the examination hall, I was astonished to find the same passage which I had translated the previous night. Bhagavan treated animals and birds with great affection and concern. Sometimes a couple of monkeys would walk into the meditation hall. Some devotees used to get agitated. Bhagavan would gently call the monkeys and give them some nuts. They would go away screeching with delight. Sometimes a squirrel would scramble up to the couch and Bhagavan would fondle it and give it whatever was available, and it would leave without disturbing anybody. Similarly, a peacock would come and get some puffed rice from his hand. Once an ashram deer was attacked by some animals, and the wounds turned from bad to worse. Bhagavan sat near the deer, held its face in his hand, looking at its tearful eyes. The Sarvadakari of the ashram asked my uncle, who was standing close, to look after the deer and relieve Bhagavan. Bhagavan heard this, but did not make any response, and sat there till the deer breathed its last. There is a samadhi for the deer near that cow, Laxmi. My uncle, when young, asked Bhagavan, "Is it true that Ravana had 10 heads?" And Bhagavan said, "How does it help you to know whether he had 10 heads or not?" When the Matrubeteshwara temple was being constructed, Bhagavan used to lift the bricks and offer them to the mason. He told my uncle, "I am helping construction work." On one occasion, a large number of people came to the ashram unexpectedly, and they had to be provided lunch. One of the cooks went to Bhagavan and said, "We are worried because there isn't enough food." Bhagavan said, "Don't worry, there will be enough." My uncle was present in the dining hall along with others. Bhagavan looked at almost everyone before he started eating. My uncle said that even before eating, most of the people felt full. So each one ate very little, and what had been prepared was more than enough.